Rob J gave me an incredibly generous 1 year's worth of subscriptions on Patreon and brings you today's video. Frodo and Sam versus Clavileno. We've got our colours, got some means of card draw, cheap vamps, pretty much all we want in this deck. Alright, Isolated Chapel will come into play tapped unfortunately, but we've got a couple of turns to get our colours going here, so a Vampire Cutthroat has Skulk and Lifelink on a 1-1, so should be able to swing in quite easily once our commander does hit play. Although unfortunately this has just 1 power, doesn't it, so Frodo may well be able to block this fairly consistently. It depends on how our opponent wants to play this. Might go for the ramp first. Yeah, and gets down the Frodo Adventurous Hobbit first of all, so not going to be able to swing in with this. Okay, and gets us into a Godless Shrine, which we can get down before the Isolated Chapel. So maybe we just get a few cards deeper into the library and go for the Night's Whisper here. And that puts us at a full grip for 7 again. There is the Legion Lieutenant, which will buff the Skull creature, meaning we can better swing in with it. And Grave Pact will make things more difficult for our opponent as well. Agent of the Iron Throne now. Whenever an artifact or creature you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1. And Frodo wants to swing in, does have Vigilance, so won't be able to swing in with the Cutthroat unfortunately. Alright, and a Plains for us, which helps with the Isolated Chapel as well, so get that into play. So maybe we just go really slow here. This is a more casual build. I don't think there's really many ways to make this particularly competitive. It's just a fun vampire build, so let's go for Welcoming Vampire. Then maybe even the Roaming Throne after that. And then we can get down our commander and the Legion Lieutenant and start making some demons. And a Sol Ring for our opponent now, down to 4 cards in hand. And now seeing Sam, Loyal Attendant. And then a food token being made by the Sam, cracking it straight away to gain the 3 life into the Frodo, so we'll be tempted by the ring this turn. Going to swing in with Frodo as well. So now our opponent's Frodo effectively has Skulk, otherwise I would gang up on it and take it out, but can't block with the Welcoming Vampire unfortunately, and no point throwing away the Vampire Cutthroat. Alright, a Mana Confluence now, so consistently getting into the lands is good. While we don't have much ramp in this deck, let's go for a Roaming Throne here I think. And then I'll swing in with the Vampire in the air just to make sure that their life total doesn't go too far above 40. Call of Unity in. At the beginning of your end step, if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, put a Unity counter on this. Creatures you control get +1/+1 for each counter on it. And then a food token from Sam again at the beginning of combat. So just cracking that for life again, and likely going to swing in with the Frodo yet again here. Now it can't be blocked by creatures with greater power, and whenever the Ring Bearer attacks, draw a card, then discard. And they do get a counter on this because they cracked a Polluted Delta this turn, so that's a buff on their things, which might be a bit of a nombo with the Frodo. Gives us more things that we can block with. Alright, so let's get a dual land with the Windswept Heath that we just got into. Need to stop drawing into lands at this point. So probably best to get down Clavileno at this point. And that will trigger the Welcoming Vampire to draw us a card. Would have triggered twice, but this only triggers once per turn, even with the double triggers from the Roaming Throne. There is a Stromkirk Condemned, which will give our vampires a buff. I think we're best going for the Legion Lieutenant here though. And then we can turn in sideways with both of these and turn them into demons, because our commander will trigger twice thanks to the Roaming Throne, and we'll hold back the Vampire Cutthroat. Won't get a card draw or turn it into a demon or anything, but if we want to keep them off a level with the ring then we can do. Just trying to land damage at this point. Next turn will be good to get down the Grave Pact and maybe start messing around with Skull Clamp. An Academy Manufactor is going to make a lot of tokens for our opponent with the Sam alone. So Sam going to make 3 tokens for our opponent here. 3 cards in hand as well. Cracking the food token straight away will gain 3 life. And we continue to get drained down by Agent of the Iron Throne, so I'm going to have to look out for this now. And then it doesn't really matter if we block Frodo or not here because it is an attack trigger. They get the loot for the first time and decide to get rid of a Rapacious Guest. So now, on level 3, whenever your Ring Bearer becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller sacks it at the end of combat, which could be useful for us if we don't manage to get into a sack outlet. And Call for Unity getting 1 more counter on it, so buffing the army even further. And then during our upkeep we see a Mortify. Destroy a target creature or enchantment. And this particular background is good with 2 cheap commanders in play. It will drain us for 2 because a treasure token was sacrificed. Alright, and there's a swamp, so maybe it's worth just getting down the Grave Pact at this point, make it more difficult for our opponent to swing in at us, because we can make some decent blocks maybe, and force them to sack. Could have blown up the Grave Pact with the Mortify, so doing it during our upkeep wasn't necessarily the right thing there. Skull Clamp going on to the Vampire Cutthroat is probably going to be alright. We'll gain a little bit more life if they decide to swing into it, and obviously we'll draw cards as well. Now cracking a Clue token will drain us for 2 again, and our opponent will draw. But Frodo and Sam are going to fully level up the ring this turn. It's a Well of Lost Dreams now. Playing and cracking a Misty Rainforest will put further buffs on the Call for Unity. And even further buffs, that is a Flowering of the White Tree. +2/+1 and Ward 1 to legendaries, and +1/+1 to non-legendaries. So Frodo now a 5/6, and Sam a 6/7. Sam continuing to make tokens, like we said, cracking the food before Frodo swings in as ever. And we go down to 12, our opponent goes up to 36, and then they can put mana into Well of Lost Dreams if they want to. Looks like they are doing that. So their 2 remaining mana sends them back up to 4. But we managed to keep them from swinging in at us, so not fully levelling up the ring here. Call for Unity gets further buffs, so 3 counters on that now. Alright, an Ancient Tomb, just continue to draw into lands, so go for the Clavileno. Getting into a sack outlet would really help us here. Little bit of a nombo with the Welcoming Vampire and Anthem effects, because we don't get to draw. But we'll swing in with the Vampire Cutthroat just for the sake of gaining some life. Our commander will trigger, and of course there's only 1 creature attacking here, so both the instances go on the same creature. So we go up to 15. Let's get down the Godless Shrine in tapped, and then we'll have to pay 1 life because we haven't got the Urborg yet. Put this Skull Clamp onto our commander, and like I said, continuing to pray for a board wipe. But this will be a half decent blocker now that it will turn into a demon, might dissuade our opponents from swinging into it. But I'm willing to block with the Welcoming Vampire whilst we've got an Anthem effect in play. Another fetch being cracked, and there we see a Sanguine Bond. Whenever you gain life, an opponent loses that much life, so that's an even bigger threat to us. So the food is going to lose us 2 life and then lose us 3 from the Sanguine Bond. So we go down to 10 and then 7. Then cracking a Clue sends us down to 5, and then another Clue sends us down to 3. Call for Unity, getting another plus counter on it, so facing down a 7/8, an 8/9, and a 6/8, but our opponent's just looking to drain us at this point. Alright, that is a Pulse Tracker, so we can draw a card with that at least. Welcoming Vampire goes on the stack, and just gets us into one of the few pieces of ramp in the deck. So we'll play out the Stromkirk Condemned. I doubt we can do anything at this point. We've been eager for either a board wipe or a sack outlet of some kind, but just haven't been able to get into it. So I'll turn in sideways with all these. The Clavileno will be able to make the Anthem effect a demon, and our own commander a demon as well. But I doubt our opponent's going to do much blocking here. And then we can discard the Ancient Tomb in order to give a buff to our creatures. But unfortunately that's not going to be enough for us. So I'll put the Skull Clamp on the Pulse Tracker, and that can be the end of that. So yeah, we've managed to make plenty of demon vampires, but just haven't been able to make use of the new text that's on there, unfortunately. So all our opponent really has to do here is go through to combat and have Sam trigger and then crack all the tokens. A Guardian Project into play won't be of any relevance, I don't think. A Bastion Protector, +2/+2 and indestructible onto both of the commanders. And that will draw with the Guardian Project. Then at the beginning of combat, a food token, the Academy Manufactor, continuing to do work. Cracking the food drains us thanks to the commanders, and the food token will take us down thanks to the Sanguine Bond. So our opponent wins this one. Hopefully we'll be able to get a half decent game in with Clavileno. I think there's a few too many hoops to jump through with it, to be honest, but we'll try again. Alright, just played against this player, but he was struggling on lands, unfortunately, so it's us struggling on lands this time, so we will mulligan into a 2-lander. We will keep and get rid of the Dusk Legion Sergeant, I think. Get out a dual land on turn 1, and we can go for the Shadow Alley Denizen, starting off with an Elixir of Immortality. Alright, and into a Verdant Catacombs. We just get further into our deck here by going for the Knight's Whisper, but we know that we can afford our commander next turn now. And Urborg is nice to fix the black mana. Don't have Cabal Coffers in the deck because the curve is very, very low. And just getting down a tapped Castle Garenbrig this time. And there is a Legion's Landing. Yeah, so I think we're just going to have to hold fire with that. Let's go for the commander. The commander can give itself the demon ability. So worst case scenario, we swing in with it and have it die off. Shadow Alley Denizen will give itself Intimidate because a black creature entered, which hopefully will be useful against this player. And when it swings in, the Clavileno, again, like we saw in the previous game, makes this a potential demon. Or, well, it is a demon now, it turns it into a 4-3 when it dies. Another tap land in the form of Pit of Offerings. Exiling both of our cards under that. This can add black mana anyway, thanks to the Urborg. And there is a Captivating Vampire, so maybe going Cap Vamp into Legion's Landing wouldn't be the worst. But I like to surprise my opponents with a Captivating Vampire. So, do we encourage our opponent to use removal on the Grave Pact? Twilight Prophet isn't going to be triggering yet anyway, so yeah, let's go for that. Does mean that next turn we're not making any more demons with our commander, but it's quite a slow and clunky ability anyway, and I think it's well worth having Grave Pact in play. Looks like our opponent doesn't have any 2-mana removal to get rid of it. A Nixthal Shrine to Nyx is in play now, hardly any devotion to any colours though. Sisay down on turn 4, and there is a Vampire Hexmage for us. No counters from our opponent yet, but we can play that here. I think it's better going for... maybe we do go Vampire Hexmage into the Legion's Landing, and then they don't expect the Captivating Vampire. So drop the Legion's Landing to make a Vampire token. May well be able to transform this next turn as well, so that we're able to get a land out of it, because apparently we're not going to have as much luck getting into lands during this game. And this gives us an opportunity to get out the Godless Shrine intapped as well. Shadow Alley Denizen is going to give the commander Intimidate, and like I said, we're not going to be able to give anything the demon ability, but we'll swing in for a bit more commander damage just in case it's of some relevance. Vampire Hexmage classically is really good for getting rid of planeswalkers because it can remove all the loyalty from a planeswalker, also can get rid of loads of plus counters and things like that, but it is also a creature that can sacrifice itself, which could be handy. Anyway, a Gaia's Cradle into play now, and there we see Castlem, which we have played on the channel already. So could have sacrificed the Vampire Hexmage in response to that, but I'd like to steal it away with the Captivating Vampire if I can. Alright, a Silver Smoke Ghoul. Put this in the deck so that we can consistently reanimate it. I'm not sure how much life gain we're going to have in the deck though, like if it's consistent enough. So I might have to cut that one. Kind of slap this deck together at the last second. Forgot to get the Godless Shrine there as well. Alright, let's go for the Captivating Vampire. And I'll have to hope that my opponent doesn't scoop to this. Shadow Alley Denizen can give the lifelink token Intimidate so that it can swing in. Although we're not going to be swinging in at all, are we? Because we do want to take the Castlem here. So we'll just tap all of our creatures straight away and steal that. Haven't controlled it since the beginning of our turn, so it does have Summoning Sickness, but our opponent's going to have to deal with the Captivating Vampire if he wants to keep creatures in play. And he has named Dinosaur with the Cavern of Souls, so goes for Pantlaza. May well have just built a new Ixalan deck, got himself into Amulet of Vigour to make the lands untap. Okay, getting into some decent cards for after a board wipe, that is Redemption Choir. So I think we start to swing in here. We'll just take in the Castlem, and then we can still steal things with the Captivating Vampire if we want to. So that gains the Demon ability, and they decide not to block it. Could maybe have swung in with the Vampire token as well to encourage them to sacrifice. We deal damage with Castlem, so managed to get a nice selection of vampires to choose from there. Maybe the Malakir Blood Witch, Cruel Celebrant, an Anthem effect, Bishop of Binding to exile something. And then we've got lands as well. Crossway Troublemakers for lifelink and Death Touch. I think I'll just go for the Blood Witch. Should be able to get a land here as well, but okay, it is allowing us to do that. They've fixed that. When I first played with Castlem, it won't let me select the lands, so I'll just grab an Isolated Chapel. And the Malakir Blood Witch is going to drain our opponent down to 19. We go up to 44. And I think we're safe to get down the Twilight Prophet at this point because we've got the Patriarch's bidding anyway. So we'll continue to annoy our opponent with Captivating Vampire. We do have the City's Blessing for the Twilight Prophet as well. Our opponent goes for Elixir of Immortality to gain 5 life and shuffle. We steal away the dinosaur. And again, I'll try to remember to go for the tapped Shockland, although don't think it really matters if we have to take 2 life at some point. Scorched Ruins coming into play now. They have to sacrifice 2 untapped lands for that, but able to tap it down for 4 mana. And there is a Mystic Myriarch, managing to deal with our opponent's creatures quite nicely here, as well as keeping them off devotion. So at Sisay, still only a 2-2. And the more vampires we steal away, and the more vampires we create, the better the Captivating Vampire is going to be. Twilight Prophet, see if we can drain our opponent for any. Managed to hit them for 2 by getting down a Stromkirk Condemned. And there we see a sack outlet in the form of Master of Dark Rites. So get that into play now. Again, I missed the Godless Shrine. Shadow Alley Denizen can give this thing Intimidate so that we can swing in. And then it'll be a handy thing to be able to sacrifice itself. Seeing as how we're not having the best of luck getting into the sack outlets in this deck. Majestic Myriarch turns into a 4-4. We'll continue to go in with the Ohakaslam. Vampire Hexmage has Intimidate, so that can swing in easily enough. And our commander will turn it into a demon, ready to sack itself. Trying to play nice here. Obviously the play to make would be to steal away the Sisay, but our opponent had a rough time in the previous game and isn't doing much better here, unfortunately. But it does show off the type of things that we want to be doing in this deck. By no means a competitive deck, but can have a bit of fun with it. Might see a trigger go off here, so we can take out both the creatures. We will allow our opponent to trade. Could remove creatures from combat here by stealing one away and then sacrificing to make them go down to the Edict effect from Grave Pact, but still get a little bit of trample damage through. Might be that our opponent has a board wipe here, so Ohakaslam comes back transformed under its owner's control, so Temple of Cultivation is over there, and it will be untapped by the amulet. They don't control 10 or more permanents, so can't do it here, and it is a sorcery speed ability anyway. Didn't get anything from the Ohakaslam ability. Shadow Alley Denizen continues to trigger because we get in a demon, which is a 5-4 flyer from the God Dying. Oh, and the ability from Ohakaslam hadn't gone off yet, so a City of Brass revealed with that. So get to put that onto the battlefield for free. Only swung in with 2 creatures there, could maybe have swung in with another one, maybe the token just for the sake of flipping that round, but don't think we're really all that desperate at this point. There is your Henny, so maybe getting that down into the potential board wipe our opponent's going to play would be an idea. Our opponent's going to struggle to stick any creatures now that the Grave Pact with a sack outlet and a bunch of creatures is in play, so it's going to have to be a board wipe really. Got a lot of mana, whatever it is, maybe Genesis Wave or something. Okay, but just tapping out and passing unfortunately, so it looks like we've got this one. Showed our opponent an Oathsworn Vampire, and another sack outlet in the Viscera Seer, finally getting into those. But won't disrespect my opponent's time anymore. Hopefully we've got enough to take him out here, I think we do by quite a margin. So finally flipping round the Legion's Landing into a land. And as ever, appreciate my opponent being a class act and playing it out. Saw a tiny little bit towards the end there of what we can do with the commander, drawing a card and making demons with it. It puts our opponents in a really difficult position once we get enough demons made, which can be quite slow going, but once we get quite a few demons made and put down things like sack outlets and Grave Pact, it resists board wipes, and it also makes it difficult for our opponent to stick creatures, and even if they do wipe the board, we end up a handful of cards and some big demons in the air for them to deal with as well. So hopefully you all enjoyed that one. If you want to see more from Clavileno, the first of the Blessed, then let me know. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.